star Jordan Poole, Andrew Wiggins, and Draymond Green on the floor. For the 5 minutes they were together, they outscored Denver by 14 points, and they took what was a game and turned it into a rout. And so, Stephen A., again, with all the injuries Golden State has had, Phoenix has been clearly the team to beat for the second half of this season and maybe beyond. How do we feel about the Golden State Warriors one game into their postseason run?
Well, I'm feeling very high on them, but it's not because of the Denver Nuggets. The fact of the matter is Denver's depleted. Let's call it what it is. If Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. was there, it might be a different animal. That's something that Jokic has to deal with. Coach Malone has to deal with. We understand they got good players, but missing those two guys is incredibly pivotal to their success or lack thereof because they're not going to achieve. They're going home in this series. But when you look at the Golden State Warriors, my trepidation came from the fact that you had a guy like James Wiseman, who I expected to be back, and he ended up being out for the season. That's a 7-footer who can give you some points, but more importantly, he could give you 15 to 20 minutes a game and 6 fouls. And I think that's the only thing that was missing from the Golden State Warriors winning the chip. Having said all of that, to see Jordan Poole in his first game dropping 30, to see Klay Thompson averaging 33 in his last 3 regular season games, and then coming out there and looking very Klay-like in this first game, to know that Steph Curry eventually will find his groove and find his rhythm, which is why Coach Kerr left him on the floor late in the game when they were comfortably ahead and the outcome had been decided, just to help him get his rhythm back. You can imagine if Jordan Poole, Klay Thompson, and Steph Curry are out on the court together, how in the hell are you going to stop them? What they did for us was have us salivating about the collision course that is the Golden State Warriors against the Phoenix Suns. It's what the basketball world wants. After all the nonsense we've had to put up with this year, it's what the basketball world deserves, and we're praying we get it.
Give me a quick thought on that, VC, on Golden State when they've got those guys out there. It's fun to watch.
It is fun to watch, and it's great. When you get something from Looney and Kuminga to really get out there and allow Draymond not to get in foul trouble, you can go to that lineup as long as you want because Draymond's able to be aggressive because he's not in foul trouble. And that lineup is great when you play smaller because when the floor is spread with those individual scorers that can beat guys off the dribble, then find open shooters, how do you stop that?
All right, VC, awesome today.
Great.
Thank you so much. And Stephen A., thank you very much. We will see you on First Take in 17 minutes. Go ahead, Steve.
I want to say 2 quick comments. Number one, CP3 approaching age 37 is the best pure point guard on the planet. Number one. And number two, it's beautiful to hear Vince Carter say he agrees with Stephen A. so much because people tend to do that, VC. They tend to agree with me, my brother.
And some go the other way.
Sometimes
That's why
I
we have
agree
a
with
show
you
that comes up in 20 minutes. Thank you, Stephen A. We'll see you in 17 minutes, to be exact, on First Take. In the meantime, our action-packed April rolls on Saturday with the next German Classico between Bayern and Dortmund on ABC. Coverage noon Eastern. Then Tyson Fury putting his belt on the line against Din. We've already had the best finish. What is your number one takeaway from what we saw yesterday with the Nets and Celtics?
Well, listen, I definitely think that the Nets need to win Game 2 because then you're asking them to win 4 or 5 against the Boston Celtics team that's expecting Robert Williams III back, and I don't think that's going to happen. So Game 2 definitely is pivotal for the Brooklyn Nets, no doubt about it. But we have to speak about the sensational play of Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving was absolutely outstanding. He was unstoppable. He put on an absolute show. Don't worry about what happened with Kevin Durant in Game 1. That will not repeat itself in terms of his offensive prowess. That was a very uncharacteristic KD performance. That's not what we're accustomed to seeing from him. He's one of the most efficient offensive superstars this game has ever seen. He just had a bad day at the office. That's all it was. Now, he was responsible largely for that missed defensive opportunity. He was the one that let Jason Tatum get down there without contesting or guarding him, and Kyrie Irving was in a no-win situation at that particular moment in time. But in the end, it was still a nail-biter, and with Kyrie Irving playing the way that he played, what it told me is that if KD is KD, which I fully expect, that my prognostication about the Brooklyn Nets winning this series in 7 games is entirely plausible.
So, Stephen A., one of the things that you and I and all of us on Countdown have talked about a lot as we've worked through this very dramatic Nets season is the coaching of Steve Nash. And Jay Will was in here earlier today pointing out that late in the game, late game situations yesterday. The Nets didn't look like they had any real offensive plan. Their defense looked disorganized. The Celtics looked so much more ready for the moment. How would you, Stephen A., how much of that are you putting on the coach and the coaching?
Well, first of all, here's the bottom line. Jay Williams is right about what he said in highlighting some of the deficiencies of Steve Nash. My direct response is I don't give a damn. I don't want to hear about Steve Nash. When you're talking about Steve Nash, I want to hear about Sean Marks. I want to hear about Kevin Durant. And I want to hear about Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving and KD, Kyrie Irving specifically said, we really don't need a coach. KD co-signed on that. And obviously Marks hired Steve Nash. Steve Nash is a good dude. Hall of Fame caliber player. We all know what he brought to the table. Two-time league MVP. Very knowledgeable about the game of basketball. But didn't have any coaching experience whatsoever. Zero. And these guys, who are both champions, were arrogant enough to believe that you didn't need coaches. And you had an executive in Sean Marks that signed off on that. Live with that. I don't want to hear complaints about Steve Nash. Steve Nash has done better than most of us thought he would. We've looked at Steve Nash. We knew what his deficiencies were, getting that head coaching job for the Brooklyn Nets. We knew he did not deserve it. And he still has been better than average. I look at him, and I don't hold him accountable at all. Whatever his deficiencies are, all of us predicted they would be, and KD and Kyrie did not care, signed off on it anyway, and Sean Marks obviously okayed it because he hired the guy. Bring up their names when you bring up Steve Nash, because they said we really don't need it in order to win. Well, show us then.
VC, let me come back to you then, because we talked about the Celtics side of that win and the exhilaration of it. How about the other side? If you're a team leader right now on the Nets and you have just lost this golden opportunity to steal game one, you lose in about as heartbreaking a fashion as imaginable. What are the leaders on that team saying right now to get them ready to play the critical game two?
We're going to win game two, point blank. Because if you hear that and you hear your stars already speaking it into existence, you focus and you know what's coming. KD's going to probably say, yeah, I need to be better. I need to figure out how to make shots when needed, regardless of double teams. Because we know KD is one of the best tough shot makers while being defended in the league. So he's going to figure out how they play. They understand. They see the way the Boston Celtics played game one. So there's going to be adjustments. KD is going to make his personal adjustments and be prepared. So I agree with Stephen A on that. But at some point, Steve Nash is going to have to figure out with his coaching staff how to make the game easier for his stars and everyone else for that matter.
All right, Stephen A., while I have you, I want to go back through the weekend a little bit here and get some takes for the audience that didn't get a chance to see, particularly Saturday night. All the build-up to this game and this series with the Sixers and the Raptors. Was this going to be a bad matchup for Philly? Is all the pressure on James Harden? Well, Harden didn't have a huge offensive game, but he had a lot of assists. Tyrese Maxey was ridiculous with 38 points. The Sixers win easily. The Raptors are now banged up with a lot of serious injuries, including Scotty Barnes. So how do we feel as we take the temperature of the Sixers? It feels like all the time. How do we feel in Philly right now, Stephen A.?
Well, they're lucky as hell. Let's just call that what it is. Scotty Barnes being out, Gary Trent being out, and others. I mean, they're lucky as hell. If Toronto doesn't win game two, this series is over in 5 at the most. We all understand that. And I also tell you that James Harden is incredibly lucky because with Maxey having elevated his level of play to the degree that he is, suddenly we're not looking for James Harden and saying, you got to average 30 to 35. You got to shoot better than 45% of the field to show us that you are that dude, because that's what Philly's going to need in order to get out of the East. If Maxey continues to play this way, James Harden can get away with a consistent performance like he did in game one. If James Harden is walking around averaging 22, 23 points with 13 to 15 assists per game, but Maxey is excelling offensively, then all of a sudden the level of accountability that's going to be thrown in James Harden's direction is not going to be the same as it was coming into this series. So I think that's something that helps him. I think it's something that helps the Sixers. It definitely emboldens everybody involved, and they benefit from it.
What about at VC? How do you see the Sixers right now in that Eastern Conference?
So I think I agree with Stephen A. with that. And if you could get 64 points and 10 rebounds, shooting 65% from two and like 67%, something crazy from three, from Tobias Harris and Maxey, you make the game easier for James Harden, like you said, because right now you look at it, you say, oh man, if they can, because I think they're going to be tested regardless of who's missing for Toronto when they get to Toronto, because you're missing someone like Thibault, who is a difference maker defensively. He goes and locks down your best offensive player, and they're able to get out in transition. But if Maxey can sustain that, because remember, Nick Nurse is a defensive guy who's going to make defensive adjustments to make things tougher for him as well. So look for the adjustment and see how they handle it. If not, now it's time for James Harden to step up if those two guys, Tobias Harris and Maxey, do not play well.
All right,